Hello and welcome back to my channel. Jacob Payton here, and I'm going to be doing a book haul. I picked up a lot of books this month. Some of them are from February, a lot of them are from the beginning of March. I went to some thrift stores, did a lot of trade-ins, so I got a lot of really cool stuff to show you guys. So yeah, let's just jump straight into it. First up, I have this book, Shadow Fires by Leigh Nichols. And it says the best-selling author to the Key of Midnight. I have not heard about Leigh Nichols before, but this promises to be a novel of unrelenting terror. Here, I'll show you guys the cover for that. And one thing, it does kind of seem like it is maybe even more of an international book, because it does say on the back, it gives a price for the UK, Australia, and New Zealand, but does not give a price for the US. So yeah, I'm also not super familiar with the publisher, Fontana, but either way, this kind of looks like a paperback from hell, so it's right up my alley. And on the back it says, he's dead. Rachel's violently possessive ex-husband, hideously mangled in a freak accident, has disappeared from the city morgue. Now someone or something is watching her, calling her, stalking her, and though no one will believe her, she knows who it is. His walking corpse, a grotesque mockery of life, his brilliant warped mind once again alive and seething with jealous rage. Seeking an unspeakable revenge beyond her worst nightmare, stalking her with murderous lust that will not die. There's nowhere left to run. Rachel, don't bother to get up. He has his own key. So yeah, that sounds right up my alley. Undead husband coming back to kill someone. I'm here for it. Next up is a whole series. Well, it's not the whole series. I just got books 1 through 4. You guys can see these. Yeah. This is, book 1 is Way of the Wolf. It's book 1 of The Vampire Earth by E.E. Knight. At first I wasn't too sure. The covers don't really convey that it's a vampire book, other than the fact that everyone has stakes. But I've always really kind of enjoyed the whole post-apocalyptic vampire thing. I really like the movie Stakeland and its sequel, and I do believe there was also a... man, I'm gonna mess up this title. But there's been several other, let me not even try, but there was several other series that were based on vampire post-apocalyptic situations, which got several seasons. The one I'm thinking of got like 3 or 4. But anyway, this book takes place in 2065, the whole series does, and it says, Louisiana, a lot has changed in the 43rd year of the Curian Order. Possessed of an unnatural and legendary hunger, the bloodthirsty Reapers have come to Earth to establish a new order built on the harvesting of enslaved human souls. They rule the planet, they thrive on the sin of fear, and if it's night as sure as darkness, they will come. On this pitiless world, the indomitable spirit of mankind still breathes in Lieutenant David Valentine. Brought into the wolves, an elite guerrilla force sworn to win back Earth, Valentine leads his first command in the Curian Zone. Driven by the losses of his past and the hope of a future, Valentine is in it to win, no matter how long it takes, no matter what doom awaits him beyond his wildest nightmares. So yeah, I mean, this is right up my alley. I don't know quite how I feel about the vampires kind of sounding like they're going to be aliens, but that being said, I've seen it done really well in the past, so hopefully it'll be the same situation here. Like I said, I'm pretty invested. I did pick up all 4 books, so I'm hoping for the best. Next up is another series. This is Dark Forces and The Last Command by Timothy Zahn, which I think is the Heir of the Force series. Let me double check that before I say something and get corrected. Oh man, they have so much stuff in here. Yeah, this is the Dark Force Rising series, so I don't know if it comes before Thrawn or after Thrawn, because I haven't read Thrawn, which I'm going to correct, because I picked these up, and I think I put one of them in a TikTok, and someone was like, hey, you need to go read all the Thrawn books, which are also by Timothy Zahn. But either way, I'm about halfway through this, done with this one, which is the second book in this series. I really like the series so far, so I did actually end up borrowing the Thrawn series, so I am going to go ahead and read that too. So if you're someone out there that's like, hey, don't read these before reading the Thrawn series, don't worry, I am correcting that. I'm heavily invested in this. I very much like Thrawn as a bad guy so far. I like how calculating he is. I also like the fact that he's not a Sith. I feel like having every bad guy be a Sith really takes away from the fact that the Empire itself had a lot of very awful leaders. When I say awful, I don't mean like they were bad at strategy. I just mean they were coldly calculating on how to do terrible things. And I think that's really come out in the series that we've gotten, especially the last series that came on Disney Plus. So I'm really excited to read more of this series and to get more in depth into Thrawn, because I do believe they're making either a show or a series where he is going to be one of the central villains, if not the central villain. So that will be fun to see, and also not only fun to see, but kind of cool to know what's happening, because I'll be honest, I've kind of tapped out on Star Wars for a while, so a lot of the newer stuff that's coming out, I don't really know most of these characters like I did back in the day. Next up, I have The Shadow of the Wind. Not a super exciting book cover here. It does kind of open, but it's very much not a whole lot going on compared to some of these other covers. And it says, Barcelona, 1945. A city slowly heals from its war wounds. And Daniel, an antiquarian book dealer's son, who mourns the loss of his mother, finds solace in a mysterious book entitled The Shadow of the Wind by one Julian Carfax. But when he sets out to find the author's other works, he makes a shocking discovery. Someone has been systematically destroying every copy of every book Carfax has ever written. In fact, Daniel may have the last of Carfax's books in existence. Soon, Daniel's seemingly innocent quest opens a door into one of Barcelona's darkest secrets. An epic story of murder, madness, and doomed love. Someone put online, I think, when I picked this book up, when I was looking at it, they mentioned it being kind of like a gothic book. I'm very much into gloomy gothic reads, so I went ahead and picked this up. I like gothic romances. I very much like the whole big house on the moors vibe. I'm also a book nerd, so the idea that this guy is running around trying to collect obscure books 110% vibes with me. So I am kind of excited to read this. I also think it's going to be a lot different than what I usually read. So it's going to be kind of fun to take a break from some fantasy science fiction and just straight out horror for a little while. That's definitely more probably a summer read though. Let's see, what do we got next? Ooh. Like I said, I kind of got a lot on this one. Next up is God Citadel by Juanita Colson. Against sorcery and the strange and human power of the death god, Tyrus had only his spells, his wits, and his courage. So there we see like a dragon creature and a bowed wizard, and I'm not gonna lie, I 110% got this book because the cover looks really awesome. That being said, I am obviously gonna read it, but I don't want to lie to you guys. I got this because the cover was really sweet, and I've been in a real sword and sorcery bench this year. On the back, it does say this is the first time in print. I wonder if it got reprinted after this. If so, I wonder if the cover is still as cool. And it says, The Trail of the Wizard. Once Vradur, not gonna probably pronounce that wrong. It's Vradur. Gotta love those fantasy names. Had been a mighty king and sorcerer, but lust for power had led him to betray his people and condemn his son Tyrus to a heinous imprisonment. Now disguised as a simple conjurer, Tyrus had followed a trail of strange thefts and kidnappings that led where Varder must be planning greater evil. Ever northward, the trail led, through the ice forest with its impassable ways and into the forbidden lands haunted by the evils of ancient dead, beyond the citadel of Nidil, the god of death. And it was there that Valdir held captive Alyssa, sister of Queen Jethel, whom Tyrus loved. Me and fantasy names, man. Anyway, I'm really excited for that. It seems like a pretty clean cut sword and sorcery book. Evil wizard in league with some bad stuff. Good guy going to save them and a princess. I'm excited for it. Next up is another sword and sorcery book that I had not heard of, and this is The Hammer and the Blade, A Tale of Eagle and Nyx by Paul S. Kemp. And it does have a pretty interesting cover right there. Basically a guy holding two hammers while another guy holds a scimitar in the back. And it says, so here's the plan. Kill the demon, steal the treasure, retire to a life of luxury. It sounds easy when put like that. Most unfortunately for warrior priest Egil and sneak thief Nyx, however, when the demon they kill turns out to have worshippers in high places, retirement is not an option. A wonderfully fast-paced fantasy adventure redolent of the classic tales of swords and sorcery from New York Times best-selling author Paul S. Kemp. I am 110% excited to read this. This is giving me really big Farid and Grey Mouser vibes, and also a little bit of Gotrek and Felix vibes. As you can see, I have a bookmark in it, so I've already started it. As one of the characters is a little more serious than the other, I love fantasy pairings like that, especially in sword and sorcery universes. So I'm very excited for this book, and I do like it a lot so far. Next up is The Hooded Man Omnibus by Paul Kane. This is an omnibus of post-apocalyptic novels. And it says, after the world died, the legend was reborn. When civilization shuddered and died, Robert Stokes lost everything, including his wife and son. The ex-cop retreated into the woods near Nottingham to live off the land and wait to join his family as the world descended into a new dark age. He turned his back on it all. The foreign mercenary and arms dealer, De Falas, sees England is ripe for conquest. He works his way up the country, forging an army and pillaging as he goes. When De Falas arrives at Nottingham and sets up his new dominion, Robert is drawn reluctantly into the resistance. From Sherwood, he leads the fight and takes on the mantle of the world's greatest folk hero. The Hooded Man and his allies will become a symbol of freedom, a shining light in the horror of a blighted world. But he can never rest. De Falas is only the first of his kind. In this omnibus, it says, collects the novels Arrowhead, Broken Arrow, and Arrowland. I did start this book. So far, I really like it. I like the idea of sword and sorcery in post-apocalyptic worlds. Obviously, this book so far doesn't have sorcery, but the idea of essentially a guy using a bow and arrow against guns is something I like a lot. I was a fan of the show Arrow. I like the Green Arrow comics. I like some of the movies, Robin Hood Men in Tights. So this is something that is hitting all the right tropes for me so far. Next up, I have Conan and the Death Lord of Thansia. Really cool kind of Conan cover here. I think I may have shown this in another video, so I do apologize if I'm showing this twice. But either way, I am excited about this book. And it says, The Death Lord of Thansia. Few places are as desolate as the Thansia Mountains, on the border of Numidia and Aquileia. Few areas are so remote, so dangerous, or so inescapable, which is why Conan chose these mountains as the perfect spot to hide in the first place. Unfortunately, it is the single worst spot in the world for Conan to be. Bandits and sorcerers and worse inhabit this lonely realm. Worst of all, it is the home of the soul of Thansia. He who possesses the soul will become the Death Lord, a post unfilled for many thousands of years. If the Death Lord should come into his full power, mountains will move, seas will be pushed back, the earth itself will shiver, and dead men will rise to fight again. No army of puny humans will be able to stand against the Death Lord. Only one man would even dare to try, Conan, the Cimmerian. So yeah, I do apologize once again if I have talked about this book before. It was in my pile of books I haven't shown. So I don't think I did, but I may have. If I did, I am sorry. But either way, I'm really excited about this. I have been trying to track down a lot more of the Tor Conan books. This one is by Roland J. Green, which I think I have another one of, and I haven't quite read it yet. Tor did a whole Conan run, and they have, at least the ones I've seen so far, have some really awesome covers. Next up, I have John Carter of Mars, and this is The Martian Tales, of course, by Edgar Rice Burroughs, book 11. And it's got that really cool cover of John Carter, and anyway, he's on this giant, eagle creature, and it says, Menace from space. No sooner had John Carter fought off the seemingly invincible giant warrior attacking the mighty city of Helium than he was faced with a more terrifying challenge from the gulfs of space. Skeletal creatures from Jupiter were plotting the conquest of Mars, and their first act was to kidnap the Red Planet's warlord. I've just kind of been picking these books up wherever I go. I do love their covers. They look really cool on the shelf. I am doing a reading of John Carter of Mars. I don't know at which point I'm going to finish it and actually get to book 11. So far, I'm on book 2. They're not super long. I also don't know if all of these were written by Edgar Rice Burroughs, so that's something I'm going to have to look into, because I do know at some point a lot of his series were obviously done by ghostwriters after his death, because I think some of the Tarzan books I have are like that. Speaking of that, here is Tarzan and the Ant-Man. I picked this one up. This was another one of those books that was 50 cents. And I've also been adding to some of the Tarzan ones. I don't really read these in order. This is Tarzan number 10. I just kind of grabbed the ones that look interesting. Tarzan, for me, is also very sword and sorcery. And I like more of the Lost World Tarzans, where he's fighting these ancient civilizations, and more of the Conan-esque Tarzans than, say, I guess the ones that are supposed to be, or were supposed to be more contemporary, where he's going up against hunters or getting into more of like the British colonial politics of the time. I like this, right? He's fighting a giant that's holding a miniature person with a bow and arrow. That seems like a lot going on. And on the back it says, Tarzan and the Ant-Men. No man had ever penetrated the great thorn forest until Tarzan of the Apes crashed his plane behind it on his first solo flight. Within lay a beautiful country, but in it lived the Alia, strange Stone Age giants whose women regarded all men as less than slaves. And beyond the Alia lay the country of the Ant-Men, little people only 18 inches tall. There in Trohanadalmachus, Tarzan was an honored guest until he was captured by the warriors of Veltopismachus in one of the Ant-Men's wars. They had their plans for the ape-man. By the advanced science of the little men, Tarzan was shrunk to their size and set to work as a quarry slave. So yeah, this is just real crazy pulp fiction all the way around, and I'm here for it. I don't read those in any type of order, so I'll probably just pick that up randomly. Then next up, I got The Cat Who Walks Through Walls by Robert Heinlein. I like this cover. It's one of the reasons I picked it up. I'll be honest, I don't pick up every Robert Heinlein book that I see, as I do like his writing, but compared to a lot of more contemporary science fiction, some of it's a bit dry for me, so sometimes it can be harder for me to get into a Robert Heinlein novel. And they're also... they're not so much like a lot of the Star Wars novels or even Star Trek novels where it's just a lot of shooting and a lot of fast-paced action and story, whereas like a lot of the Heinlein stuff, I kind of have to take my time and think about what's going on and maybe even think about what the author is trying to say with that plot or, you know, that trope and what he's trying to do at the time. And sometimes, I'll be honest, especially if I'm reading multiple books at once, which I usually am, I don't always want to do that. So yeah, but anyway, I did pick this one up. I've heard good things. And let's see if it gives a description. A lot of times it doesn't on some of these books. Dr. Richard Ames, ex-military man, sometime writer and unfortunate victim of mistaken identity. When a stranger attempting to deliver a cryptic message is shot dead at his dinner table, Ames is thrown headfirst into danger, intrigue, and other dimensions, where Lazarus Long still thrives, where Jubal Harshaw lives surrounded by beautiful women, and where a daring plot to rescue the sentient computer called Mike can change the direction of all human history. So yeah, this just seems like fun. I'm sure there's going to be some stuff that's going to take me time to think about, or some stuff like Starship Troopers that's going to take time to digest. But like I said, I probably won't read a bunch of books at the same time that I am reading that. Next up, I've got The Deadlands by Benjamin Percy. And it says, 150 years ago, when the world began to fall apart, when the flu mutated and millions began to die, downtown St. Louis was fortified. Few had to make the immediate decision to live or die. So a wall was built and has remained ever since. St. Louis, now called the Sanctuary, is a shielded community that owes its survival to its militant defense and fear-mongering leaders. Then a rider comes from the wasteland beyond its walls. She reports on the outside world where civilization thrives. But there is danger too. The rising power of an army that pillages and enslaves every community they happen upon. Against the wishes of the Sanctuary, a small group sets out in secrecy on an epic quest across America's blasted heartland, determined to secure a better life. Led by Louis Merriweather and Mina Clark, they hope to expand their infant nation and to reunite the states, but the Sanctuary will not allow them to escape without a fight. It kind of seems like it might be a Lewis and Clark retelling in a post-apocalyptic future, but either way, it sounds a lot of fun. I'm reading a lot of post-apocalyptic books, which I'm going to be honest, I don't usually do, mostly because they tend to be too much of downers. The only ones I kind of make exception for are, I'll pick up random Deadlands books because they're kind of fun, but overall I tend to avoid post-apocalyptic fiction for the same reason I tend to not read a whole lot of zombie fiction, and it's just because a lot of them have there are no-win scenarios, right? And what I mean by this is you're not really going to find usually a happy ending even at the end of those stories, whether it's a trilogy or an ongoing series. Take The Walking Dead, for instance, for if you're a watcher and you were a fan of that, you know that the best case scenario is they die the least worst. in a lot of cases. I did not finish The Walking Dead. I do know that a lot of characters have met terrible, terrible, terrible ends that really alienated most of the fan base. That being said, I have tried to read zombie series and other post-apocalyptic series in the past, and just kind of found that overall they aren't for me as much. Now, that being said, there are some that I really like, but they are few and far between. So, you know, if you see me in this channel say something that you don't agree with a post-apocalyptic book, do kind of bear in mind that they're not 100% my thing. Just like zombie fiction isn't 100% my thing. But that being said, there are parts of each that I make exceptions for, because there are ones that I get really into. I mostly just like to see any character I've been following in a fantasy or fictional universe to kind of win in the end, even if the win isn't big. I'm not talking about, but I need them to maybe you know, just kind of be alive at the end of the book, and we don't always get that in the series, right? So yeah, I am reading a lot of post-apocalyptic fiction. I don't know how I feel about it, but so far the books have been pretty good. Next up is this last big stack of books. But I'm going to get to these pretty quickly, as I know this video is getting on pretty long. First up is Tainted Blood by Mary Ann Mitchell. Kind of see this person in like a corset. And it says, the infamous Marquis de Sade has lived through the centuries, spreading his evil and perversion over 2 continents. This master vampire cares little for his human playthings, seeking them out only for his amusement and nourishment. Once his dark passion and his bloodlust are sated, he moves on, leaving another drained and discarded toy in his wake. Now Sade's travels have a definite purpose. He is determined to find the woman who has made his life hell for 200 years and destroy her once and for all. His journey leads him back to America, to a seemingly normal suburban house, but the family who lives there is far from normal. They too are undead, vampires as dangerous as Sade. Despite their wholesome appearance, and when the notorious Marquis meets the all-American family of vampires, the resulting culture clash will prove fatal, but for whom? I love vampires, so this was a pretty easy purchase for me. It also helped that the bookstore I got them from was doing like a 5 for 5. So basically you bought 5 books and you got 5 books free, so that was kind of cool. And I also had some trade-ins, so I really didn't have to pay anything. I love vampire books so freaking much. So like I said, easy pickup. I even like bad vampire books, so it's really a win-win whether it's good or not. Then next up, I have Werewolves by Jerry and Sharon Aaron, the product of a crazed furor, and now they are soldiers of horror. I am really excited to find this. I've heard about this book. Heard about it in a lot of paperbacks from Hell communities. So Nazi werewolves, I'm here for it. The evil genius, a student of the occult, Hitler knew that a properly trained werewolf would be the ultimate warrior. With their shredding fangs, gutting claws, and uncanny regenerative powers, they are the ideal killing machines. Through a miracle of genetic engineering, the sadistic madman created the SS unit that would win the war, if they could be controlled. It was a special homecoming for Danny and her father. They were both Highcliffe alum, and they hadn't seen each other for too long. The festivities were marred by reports of savage assaults by a wild beast loose in the city. Then there were more attacks. This time people died. Their corpses never fully recovered. Huge, bear-like animals lurched along the streets, feeding on human limbs, smashing windows and dragging out mutilated bodies. Then Danny's father saw the face he last saw in Nazi Germany 40 years ago, a face that hadn't aged a day, a face that seemed to command respect from the ghoulish beasts feeding on the town. Suddenly it started to make horrific sense. His darkest fear had become a reality. Werewolves, double S. Yeah, I'm excited for this. Nazi Werewolves America. It seems like it's going to be pretty violent. It seems it's going to be gory, and it's going to be straight up werewolf horror fiction, which I'm always here for. I've mentioned in a couple reviews that I've done of werewolf books that it is hard to kind of find werewolf horror books. A lot of what gets put up as werewolf horror, I feel like, tends to be more romance, and that's okay. It's just not usually what I'm looking for at the time. Then next up, I have Darkfall by Dean Koontz, and it is this kind of really cool holographic looking shiny cover. And it says, they found 4 corpses in 4 days, each more hideously disfigured than the last. The bodies punctured with dozens of tiny wounds. At first they thought it was a savage psychopath. Then they thought it was a vicious gangland war. Then they thought packs of demonic rats were escaping through the ventilation system. Then they saw the nightmare itself and all its mottled, slimy horror coming after them from every direction. And they realized that the gates of hell had been left open. Bum, bum, bum. I've been reading a lot of Dean Koontz horror lately, and I really like it. I mean, obviously he's more known for suspense and thrillers, but the man writes a really good fast-paced horror book too. And as someone that DNF'd the Odd Thomas series, I am saying that I really like his other books. Then next up is another Leigh Nichols books, and this is The Key to Midnight, which kind of shows, I'm not sure, it's almost like a robotic or doll-like surgeon holding a syringe. And it says, who was Jonah Rand? Alex Hunter hadn't come to Japan to fall in love, but Joanna Rand was the most beautiful, exciting woman he had ever met. Yet Joanna was not who she thought she was. 10 years before and halfway across the world, a brutally bizarre experiment had recreated her mind. A violation so hideous that her dreams were filled with horror, and her memories were a lie. If they were ever to be free, Alex and Joanna had to reopen the dangerous door into the nightmare past. Somehow had to find the key to midnight. I'm excited. I feel like I'm learning about an author that I didn't know about before, who was maybe popular in other places that weren't the U.S. And I'm always up to finding more horror, especially more horror writers. So this is kind of fun for me. I am definitely going to look into Fontana Publishing and just kind of see, what their whole deal was. Because I'm kind of picking the vibe up just based off the 2 books that I've gotten from them. That they were maybe kind of like Zebra paperbacks were. Which Zebra's horror line is kind of like notorious in a lot of paperbacks from Hell circles. And they're kind of giving me the same vibe. I don't know if that's true. I could be way off base. They could maybe have just published a couple horror books and then been a full romance line. So before I dig my hole any deeper, I'm just going to look it up. Then next up, I have The First Book of Swords by Fred Saberhagen. This I got because it kind of looked like it might be a sword and sorcery style book. And because I have read some Fred Saberhagen Dracula books, and I like them, so I like his pacing and I like his story style. So I am kind of excited to see this. But once I read the back of it for the first time, it did kind of give me epic fantasy vibes. But once again, I'll let you guys decide. It says, thousands of years after a war so terrible that it changed the very laws of nature, gods and giants once again stalk the earth and play their games with human lives. The First Book of Swords. Not really much on a description, but it does have a kind of a cool image. It looks like some dragons or something flying over there. Either way, I'm excited to kind of see what Fred Saberhagen will do with fantasy. And then next up is another vampire book, and this is Blood to Blood. The Dracula story continues, and this is by Elaine Bergstrom, and this was an Ace book. And it says, she thought the story ended when Dracula was destroyed. And this is supposed to be the spellbinding sequel to Mina. And I did see another book on the shelf called Mina, but that being said, it was not by the same author, so I don't know if this was a series that had multiple authors or if maybe I was looking at the wrong book. Either way, I am going to try to find the correct first entry into this Dracula Continues series, because from the description, it does sound very interesting. And it says, she thought the story ended when Dracula was destroyed, but she was wrong, dead wrong. Finally free of Dracula's spell, Mina Harker returns to London, determined to build a new life for herself, wondering if she still has a life with her husband, Jonathan. Then Jonathan's nightmares begin, a sure sign that one vampire survived, one who has tasted his blood and is coming to get him. Grabbing some gold gems and a box of grave dirt, half-mad Joanna Tempest, sister by birth and blood to Dracula, has turned her icy green eyes towards London. Walking the foggy English streets by night, Joanna encounters a certified villain, a Ripper-like maniac who attacks her friend Colleen and her source of blood and love. And Joanna's need for vengeance becomes as sharp as her need for blood. With Joanna on the loose and women dying on the streets of London, Mina and Jonathan come face to face with the true meaning of evil. But which is more deadly, the dark desires of the living or the midnight hunger of the dead? Yeah, I'm here for this. I'm 100% here for all of this. I love the Dracula story and I love vampires, and I think this is just going to be a lot of fun. Next up is The Crimson Shadow Omnibus by R.A. Salvatore. I have not read any of his Crimson Shadow books. I have seen them from time to time. He did write a lot of stuff outside of the Forgotten Realms series that he's done, but I feel like that stuff doesn't get talked about as much. And when it is talked about, though, it's talked about very highly. So I have been trying to track it down. It's just, it seems to be harder to find because I feel like a lot of it might not be in print, or at least might not be as visible in some of the places I shop compared to his Drizzt lines and his Forgotten Realm stuff. And it says, alone, young nobleman Luthien Bedware can do little to save the land of Eredor from a foul wizard's demon armies. But with the help of mysterious allies, Luthien transforms into a legendary outlaw, a fearless rebel leader who strikes at will, remains hidden from foes, and casts the Crimson Shadow. And this collects 3 books: The Sword of Bedware, Luthien's Gamble, and The Dragon King. And then next up, I have Shotgun Arcana by R.S. Belcher. This looks like a lot of fun. I am in love with weird westerns. At some point, I'm going to get around to reviewing my whole line of splatter westerns that I have on the shelf behind me. But I love weird westerns a whole lot. So finding this on the shelf was awesome. I've seen this cover. I don't think I actually knew that it was a weird western until I saw it on the shelf. But it says 1870. A haven for the blessed and the damned, including a fallen angel, a mad scientist, a pirate queen, and a deputy who is kin to coyotes. Golgotha has come through many nightmarish trials, but now an army of 32 outlaws, lunatics, serial killers, and cannibals are converging on the town, drawn by a grisly relic that dates back to the Donner Party and the dawn of humanity. Sheriff John Highfather and his deputies already have their hands full dealing with train robbers, a mysterious series of brutal murders, and the usual outbreaks of strangeness. But with 32 of the most vicious killers on Earth riding into Golgotha in just a few days' time, the town and its people will be tested as never before, and some of them will never be the same. I'm very excited about this book. Once I get through my current TBR, I'm definitely picking this one up. And then the last book I have is just called Vampire Stories from the American South. It doesn't really give too much of a description on the back. Looks like it is a pretty small collection. But once again, I love vampires stories, and I'm from the South, so it seemed like a pretty easy thing to pick up. It seems like it was published by a company called Metro Books in 2007, but may have been compiled the first time in 1997. Ooh, originally published as Southern Blood, Vampire Stories from the American South. That's interesting. So the stories inside are The Carpetbagger, Claim Jumpin' Woman, Oh, You Got a Stake in My Heart, The Silver Coffin, Like a Pilgrim to the Shrine, The Cursed Damsel, The Sin of Magnolias, The Flame, Godless Men, Bloodkin, Carrion Comfort. So that says Carry On Comfort by Dan Simmons, which is actually a book that I have behind me. I have Carry On Comfort by Dan Simmons. I wonder if that's an excerpt from his novel, or maybe his novel is based on a short story that he did. That would be kind of interesting. I've seen authors do that before. I've done it myself, where you write a short story, you really like it, and you're like, man, it would be really fun to play in that world. I kind of wonder if that happened. Either way, it's going to be interesting to read that short story and then compare it to the novel that I'm currently reading. Blessed Be His Dying Tongue and She Only Goes Out at Night. And they're all, oddly enough, they're all kind of divided up by which state they're from. So you have like a lot of like Louisiana, South Carolina, Alabama, Tennessee, Florida, Virginia, Georgia. But one of the stories is kind of from West Virginia, and I don't really know how I feel about that for a book on the South. But either way, I'm here for this. I love vampires, and it's going to be fun, I think. And it's also going to be interesting to see if this Dan Simmons is the same Dan Simmons who has a book on this shelf behind me by the same name. This book, obviously not a short story, but it's going to be interesting to see how the story in that book ties into this one. But anyway, that is my book haul for March. That is a plethora of used books that I am hopefully going to be able to read at some point before I die, which I'm not planning on doing anytime soon, but I will say that as I've started to purge books, I've kind of realized that I think I might have accumulated more books than a person can read in one lifetime. So it has made it getting rid of some books easier. So I do try to only buy books now that I know for a fact I'm going to read. I will obviously read all the books that I bought. That's why I bought them. But you may have noticed, if you've been a long-time viewer of this channel, that my book hauls have been fewer and farther between than they used to be. I used to just buy books because they were on sale and it looked like something I would read, or something that was interesting, or something that someone had recommended, and I've kind of stopped doing that because I realized I was accumulating a lot of books that necessarily I wasn't going to get into. And it doesn't mean that they're bad books per se, it just means that authors I like put out new books every year. Some authors put out 3 to 4 books every year. So it can be hard for me to be like, oh, well, let me read this book that's kind of a maybe, and put off reading the new Grady Hendrix book, or, you know, a new, I don't know, somebody in a series that I really like books. So the point is, I just don't want to keep doing that. So you know, if I do a book haul now, it'll probably be another while before I do a book haul. I'm trying to clear more shelf space before I buy more books in the near future. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you have read any of the books I talked about, or have heard, you know, good things or bad things, you know, let me know in the comments. And as always, please like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time.